how he's using the old school print and I've got the iPad.
Did you guys plan it that way?
Not at all. Not at all. Okay, Nikhil and I have had conversations for a year now, and I keep reminding him he's only 17. Because all the things he's talking about, he's discovering for the first time, we know have been going on for generations. So I'm going to give you a few examples in the schools that I have been in. And the problem is that many of the things that we're all going to go, wow, because we know other people who have done similar things. And these are things that not just I have done, but my colleagues have done as well. For doing those very same things, a lot of people are being let go, fired, put in rubber rooms, and becoming absent teacher reserves. And that's their fault. And so, again, I'm going to share with you, as we all know, and we need to share this, that the reason we're doing this today is because we've had 3 days of people telling the world, as we all have been doing, about the problems that are going on. But we need to tell people what is good in schools, what education does actually look like. And so here are a couple of examples that I would like to give. When I started in New York City back in 1970, somebody said 1980 yesterday, and I said, really? Okay. So when I started in New York City in 1970, in high schools, I can't speak for elementary school because I hadn't been there for a long time. New York City high school teachers were at the forefront of methodology. We used Socratic method. We used inquiry. We used mastery. We used projects. We used simulations. We used all of those things. What the hell happened? Now, for yous and those, as I said before, we're tossed in a rubber room. And I have friends who have been. Yesterday, I hope you all heard Troy Grant speak. Troy's brilliant. Troy was talking about the kinds of things that he had to fight to do in Virginia. And as I was listening to him speak, he reminded me of my friend Bernie Keller. Now, Bernie and his brother Harold, who I went to college with, is a black man who grew up in the Monroe houses in the South Bronx, right across the Bruckner Expressway from Justice Sotomayor. In 1970, they built a neighborhood high school called Adlai Stevenson High School, which was one of the first schools that His Honor Mayor Doomsburg closed in 2009. I taught there for 16 years. Bernie taught there for 30 until they closed it. He moved to another one of those smaller schools in the building. Now, Bernie was one of the most highly respected teachers in that school. He taught English. He was one of the most successful, just as Troy was talking about yesterday, teachers in that school, because he knew how to respect and deal with his students because he came from the neighborhood. He knew them. They knew him. When he moved to the other school called Millennium High School, by the way, whose principal then went upstate and was indicted for cheating, she got rid of him because he stood up to her and said, no, I'm not playing that game. He then, for a year and a half, was bouncing around to all these different schools doing some things until finally he was able to latch on at the remains of Kennedy High School, another school that was opened up around the same time as Stevenson. And he's now teaching English again until that school closes. And so on Bernie, I said, so, you know, what keeps you in this? He said, because it's about the kids, it's not about me. So yesterday I spoke to Troy and I said, I got to bring you two guys together because you're just going to have a blast listening to each other. So what I want to do now is, I also said a little bit yesterday about I'm supposed to be in the New York Times this week or next week, unless they censor it, okay? Because I was going to, the Sunday Times has a thing called Sunday Dialogue. And in it, somebody writes a letter that appears in the Times on a Tuesday, and people respond to it, and the author of the letter responds back to the people, and it's printed on Sunday. So my piece was about the difference between scripted TFA teaching, which I've learned a great, hey, Bob, shut your phone off, will you please? And what real teachers do, which is what we're talking about now. And I had a terrific relationship with the young lady who was the lower level editor. And we worked back and forth on it. We had this whole thing, and then she emailed me yesterday morning, I think it was, and said, my boss may have a little problem with it because it's not balanced. I said, balanced? It's a letter to the editor. It's not supposed to be balanced. The whole idea is that people are going to respond to it. Well, we have to have another conversation tomorrow to see if it's it. So, at any rate, the idea is that, and the reason I include that now is that, let me just hold this, it's easier. The reason that I'm bringing it up is that one of the examples I'm going to talk about is in the letter. Back in the 1970s, I was watching PBS, and Steve Allen had this show called Meeting of Minds. And it was really cool because what he had is he had like 4 or 5 famous dead people sitting together at a table discussing essential questions. I said, wow, what a great project that would be for kids. So I did it for years, all right? Kids would sit around and there would be artists and politicians and revolutionaries and people from all over the world because I used it as a culminating project for world history. So we had Confucius talking to Leonardo, talking to Karl Marx, talking to all these other people. And they were, guess what? They were reviewing for the Global Studies exam and they didn't even realize it. But they knew everything they needed to know. So that's going to be in the article. At any rate, I do need to use 2 hands, so anyway. So that's one of the things. So I'm going to share with you a couple of other examples that, as I said, I and other people have done. Project called That's Life. Now this I did in Scarsdale High School. You should have your friends do it in Syosset. I said, you know what, you people are too isolated. So what I did is I created an idea where I gave them identities of the 99%, before the 99% was a term we used. And so instead of coming from a family where the average income is over about $200,000 a year, nobody had an income higher than $75,000 a year. They were from all ethnicities, all genders, they were given families, occupations, and what they had to do was become that person for 3 months. Budget their budget, find a place to live, see what schools were in the neighborhood, get and tell me who their employers were. Fill out taxes. We actually had them use TurboTax, figure out how to do that. And then decide who they were going to vote on at the next election, whichever election it was going to be, and why. I can't, if I was in New York City now, I wouldn't be able to do that. But there are schools, as Nikhil was saying, that people can still do that. And that's what we have to say. A couple of others, and then I'll pass it back.
Do you want to give the example of Andrew Russell too?
Well, yeah, you also might know that I keep talking about what I think is the best unknown program in high schools. It's called the WISE program, where we actually allow seniors, I mentioned this yesterday a little bit, after 11 and a half years of being told what to do, to go out and choose something of their passion for academic credit. English credit, social studies credit, science credit, whatever it might be, depending upon the school, where they can go out and say, okay, I want to be a political activist, and not go to class. Spend that time being a political activist for academic credit, with an in-school mentor, a teacher who they worked with as a partner, as we have over the last year in a sense, and an out-of-school expert. So, for example, I might hook them up with Morna, all right, who's a real live activist, okay, and say, okay, you can travel down to Washington, or she can come, or you can figure out a way to communicate, and for a semester you're going to work on that project, and then give a presentation and teach the public what you've learned. Not just about activism, but about your own growth. That's one of the examples. And we have trouble getting into schools these days because of the people in that building. Because people come back to us and say, how can we do that? We have to have seat time. I said, okay, so if they put their ass out of the chair in a class and stick their ass in a seat in an office, what's the difference? They're doing something and they're using their brain, and that's the point. So again, that's another problem that we're facing. A couple of other quick examples. How about a real revolution?